everyone, and welcome back to Introspection. I'm your host, Amy Lindner-Lesser, and today for my guest, I have Nancy Linnerooth, who is both a friend and a mentor for me. Nancy is an EFT or tapping expert, and her background includes some really interesting education and training and studying. She draws on 9 years of experience as a Harvard Law School a trained attorney, 17 years as a therapist, and more than 14 years as a practitioner of EFT or tapping. She is a straight talker and keeps humor in everything. So you're not going to find her being down or depressing. And she helps her clients figure out and how to release the things that are causing them to procrastinate, to avoid self-sabotage, as well as keeping them stuck in cycles of stress or grief. So join with me in welcoming our guest, Nancy. Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner-Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, Amy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. Let's start. Is there anything that I missed in your introduction?
Oh, I don't know. There's just too much that in my past. Let's not do it all. But I guess what I would just say is that currently my focus is working with women entrepreneurs to get rid of the subconscious stuff that holds them back. And how that fits in here is that quite often what is holding them back is an experience in their past, a life quake, as you call them, that led them to internalize something in their subconscious that now they don't need it, they don't want it, they aren't aware it's there, but it can prevent them from moving forward in their business and really in their life.
That's definitely true. And that's how you and I began working together. You have a current group called MVP. Mm-hmm. And let's tell us a little bit about that. And then we'll go on to some real nitty gritty.
Sure. Well, my MVP activator is for those women business owners to get rid of a lot of common blocks. So I have modules and such to help them with that. But also we have these small groups of these women business owners who come together about every other week to support each other, to uncover. We work together to uncover what's going on. And it's amazing how when you have more than one person going through similar issues, that you can uncover so much that you didn't know was there and you wouldn't have done on your own, even working with me. So the MVP activator has these clubs of women within it, and we get to do some fun stuff. So I find it to be actually in this circumstance even better for many women business owners than just one-on-one work with me, although I do one-on-one work with them as well. So.
And the MVP is mindset, visibility, and profitability, correct?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Those are the areas that most women are like, hey, I want to grow my business. And that's where the issues can come up.
And I will vouch that hearing other women tapping on issues definitely brings stuff up for me. Things that I didn't realize were back there. And so it does help.
Yep. It's amazing.
So for those in our audience who don't know, What is EFT and how does it work? Just a general.
Okay. So EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, is based on tapping points, acupressure, acupuncture. So you use these tapping points on your body, which sends a message to your brain. They've done some research on this, and there's some really interesting things in the research. Anyway, what it does is it basically sends a message of safety and calm to your amygdala, which is where the emotions get triggered and where you can end up getting triggered so that you don't move forward in the ways that you want to. So you use these tapping points to release stuff that has gotten stuck in your brain, in your subconscious when you're not even aware of it. You can release emotions or move them along and process them. It's really quite amazing. And EFT is it talks about the pattern, but it's also the ways that you can use the tapping. So you could just tap and get some benefit from it, but there's also ways that a practitioner can guide you, can make all sorts of changes. So it's used for pain, it's used for physical issues, it's used for emotional issues, it's used in the therapy room, it's used for sports performance. It's used in a lot of different places, but at base, it's these tapping points.
So it's sort of like acupuncture without the needles, but the same kinds of spots. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
not all of them. We can't reach our back.
Yeah, there's like 200 or something in acupuncture. There's
Right.
at most like 17 in EFT.
And I've heard that it almost short circuits, if you will, so that like if you're having the same thought over and over again, it's disturbing the pattern of that.
Yeah.
So that's what clears it up. Does
Yeah,
that
it interrupts that pattern. And it's like in your brain, you can have connections from a trigger and the response. And when you send that tapping in, it detaches the trigger and the response. And they don't go back together unless a new event happens to make that happen.
and if we tried to do it just by consciously thinking different thoughts, it would take a lot longer and it might not even happen.
Very
I know
true.
when I consciously try to change how I'm thinking about something, it doesn't always happen. That, before I realize it, I'm back in that same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Absolutely.
So you started showing the points because you started tapping. What are
Yeah.
the tapping points?
Well, let me move so that everyone can see what I'm doing here. So the tapping points, you start with the side of, and everyone who's watching should actually do this because it won't hurt you and it actually will help you to feel a little calmer, maybe release some stress. So you might as well do it. And then once you've done it, it's going to be easier to remember those points. So under your little finger on the side of your hand, between the knuckle and the wrist, right there, that's that fleshy part, start there. And you tap with a couple of fingers. So this is tapping about as hard as if you were drumming your fingertips on a tabletop. So it's solid. You're not leaving a bruise, but you're also not kind of whiffing it. It should just, land. Okay. So that's the first point. You use the same pressure for each of the points. The next point is where one of your eyebrows starts. So you can cross the midpoint if you want, or stay on the same side. It doesn't matter. A lot of people like to do straight above their nose. That's not exactly the spot, but it'll probably give you some benefits. So don't freak out. This is very forgiving, this tapping. The next point is on the side of your eye, right next to your eye. Don't hit yourself in the eye. Okay. The next one is about an inch below your pupil. So the point between your nose and your lip, it's really easy to find with two fingers. You can't miss it. The next one is that line on your chin. So you're not making a divot down there, not a dimple or whatever. This is up here, right about under your lip. Now, the rest of the points, you can do them with two fingers, but it takes harder to find them. So I'm going to do this the easy way. So you make a fist, and with the flat part of your knuckle, you tap where a man would knot his tie. I'm not doing it because I would hit my microphone and that would be deafening. But if you actually tap on your collarbone like that. Next spot, take all four fingers, go about 4 inches down from your armpit. For women, that's basically where your bra strap comes across on your side. And then the last spot that I like to add in, a lot of people use this spot, but it's not, it wasn't in the original group, but I love to end with the top of the head. So you take all 5 fingers and you can make like little circles and stuff. So if you've ever done break an egg or gotten one of those whisk type things that you put on the top of your head, that's what you're doing. You're activating those acupressure points up there. So those are the points that I use. I have a few other ones that I will use, but overall and generally, that's what I'm using over and over again.
And how do we do this? What's the practice?
Well, there's all sorts of ways to do it. I often will teach people how to use it for stress, where you rate your stress and you tap to specifically on the stress, and you say some words about stress to remind you that that's what you're working on. But I think if somebody is going through grief or particularly something that's got them emotionally caught up in it right now, you don't even need the words. You tap around the points. And particularly if it's grief, I highly recommend putting the side of the hand in every time you go around around these points. Often when I'm working with clients, I'll start off this way, and then we'll go round and round and round, and not come back to the hand. But this is an important point for depression, and grief and depression are not the same thing, but I think you want to be sure that you've had enough time on the side of the hand that you are actually getting the benefit of the tapping. If you don't do this, you can end up tapping till the cows come home and you might not get any benefit at all. So put that one in a lot.
Are the other points also specifically for certain emotions, or?
They might be. They could be. I know that there's plenty of theories out there, and people will tell you, well, this is the liver point and it's for this issue, and anger comes from that. And I frankly haven't studied it that much, because what I've found is that if I do this enough with people, going through all the points, whatever it is that's going on with them, including the stuff that's below the main thing we're working on, gets released and removed. So I think it's worth doing all these other points when you can. I mean, if you have a bruise or an injury, you want to skip them. I once had somebody who had major facial reconstruction after an accident. She couldn't do any of the tapping points on the face. So I ended up using different tapping points. But for the most part, if you do this round, you're going to get the results you want. If you want to go deeper into figuring out what each point is for, my guest, I got other fish to fry.
And how long do you tap? How many times do you do the circuit, if you will?
Okay, well, going around the circuit, you do that as much as you find that it's benefiting you, as much time as you have for it, or just to get you where you need to go. So I've had people who are nervous about taking some action, like being in a meeting or giving a talk or something, and they got a time to do a single round before they go out there. Okay, that's worth it. I've got other people who are like, I am stuck in something, and so I'll encourage them to tap while they're feeling all the feels until they feel it loosening enough that they can move on. Now, if I'm leading a client through some tapping, I'm looking for some signs that things are changing, things are shifting, and then we can maybe stop the tapping, check in, and take it at a different route. If you're doing it on your own, basically you're looking for how you're feeling. Is it changing? Am I doing better? Is it time? Do I just have to get on with it because my kid's coming home from school, or I've got an appointment or something like that? So does that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah,
because I've only tapped with you or with somebody else who's doing the words. And so I tap along, and when they stop or when you stop, then I stop.
Yeah.
I've never tried it myself because I didn't know I could do it without the words. And I've never felt comfortable saying what the words are because I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I don't know the issue I want to work on. How do I make it not a question, or, and so finding out that I could just tap if I'm feeling anxious is a wonderful thing. And the same
Yeah.
thing for, our listeners, that, if you're having a particularly tough day, whether it's, an anniversary and you're having an anniversary reaction,
Mhm.
whether it's like me last night with great green hair. Um, I could have tapped on it. Wouldn't have
You
changed
could have
the
that.
color, but it would have made me feel better. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and the words can be very important, particularly when with my clients where I'm trying to dig down and find out where's this coming from? How can we change it? That's where the words are so important. But if you're feeling something right there, it's in your face, it's on the surface, you don't need the words to keep you focused on it. And in fact, part of what you're trying to do is process it enough so that you don't want to have to be focusing on it. So for that, yes, you can just tap. Um, what was I going to say about that? It, as I'm as I will often tell people, tapping can move you through something faster. But with something like grief, it doesn't take it away. It's not like a magic pill. Oh, everything's fine now. All's better. Because that's not what we need. Everyone has some things that happen in life that you need to process. And what the tapping does is help keep you from getting stuck in one of the stages or one of the levels of what you're processing. It helps you move through it smoother and faster, but you're still going to experience it because, well, in my opinion, these things happen. I don't know if it's for a reason, but when they do happen, if you process what comes up for you, all those emotions, all the thoughts, it leads you to somewhere new, somewhere that perhaps has wisdom that you didn't have before. So I would never, I mean, actually, I would love to take away everyone's grief, and it's a good thing I can't. That's what I come down on.
for those of us who, have grieved, we know that it never goes away. It
No.
changes,
Mhm.
but it in some ways it's like a scar that it gets lighter. It fades into the background. It may not be something that you're constantly looking at or conscious of, but it will always be a part of your life in some way. Doesn't mean you can't go on, doesn't mean you can't even have a better life than you had before.
Yeah.
What it does mean is it'll be a different life. And it's
Yeah.
up to us to make the decision of how we want that life to be. And
Yeah.
we want it better and different.
And I think that's very wise. I have in my therapy practice back when I would occasionally have a client come in who had gotten the message that, hey, I'm supposed to be done grieving now. I'm supposed to be done with it. Aren't I over it yet? And in fact, trying to push it away and like, oh no, I'm not supposed to feel all that now, actually gets it stuck. It makes it hang around longer in that form instead of evolving the way it's meant to. So I think that wisdom that it will be there, but it isn't going to be the same all the time. That's important.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and I've said this many times, we have a society that doesn't like to deal with sadness, depression, grief, all of those shadow emotions. We just
Hmm.
try to push down in everybody. And
Yeah.
there is no set amount of time that it's going to take. And every grief is different
Hmm.
for the same for one person. And when you look at other people, you could have two siblings who lost the same parent, and their grief is completely different because their experiences and their relationships were different. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I once heard a great way of thinking about this. Yeah, our society is very poor at dealing with grief and expecting people to just get over it as if it's something that they shouldn't have.
Right.
And there was a culture, a society that got grief and did it right. It's the Victorians. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Victorians in a lot of ways, but for grief, they had a whole process and they had at least a year. Now, Victoria did it for like 20 years or something. We'll set that aside. That's maybe too much. But you had culturally expected that you'd be in mourning for a year. And I mean, there were all these things in place, covering up mirrors because you're supposed to be crying, putting straw out on the ground because you're supposed to get headaches from that, so that it would muffle the hoofs, right? Putting wreaths on the door of certain kinds so that people would go away unless they had some really important business. And then the clothes you wore would tell, I'm wearing all black. I'm in mourning for someone very close to me. And then by the end of that year, you'd maybe change into a different color, but white or lilac still told the world that you were coming through that grieving process. And we don't have anything like that here. And so everyone feels like they're on their own, which is unfortunate because pretty much everyone is going to go through grief if they haven't already had it happen. They're going to go through something that will cause this.
And
So,
grief is not just because of death.
no, not at all.
I heard yesterday that one of the coaches that I'm training with said that she had a client who was grieving over lost time, which I thought was fascinating. Not something you would really think of as grief, but this young woman said, "Well, I spent too much time partying and wasting time in my youth, and I can't get it back."
Yeah.
And
And if you
another,
stick there,
and another who was an alcoholic who lapsed and grieved over their sobriety that they had lost and had to start again.
yeah,
So
yeah.
grief happens. It's sort of like that other word happens. Grief happens.
Yeah. Well,
And
I have had some interesting experiences like that. I had one client long ago in my early days, and this was in my therapy practice, who her husband had cheated on her. And she was stuck in this loop of being mad and sad and upset about it. And this was grieving that had got stuck, and so we tapped on it, and she went from not being able to take actions. She was basically stuck. She couldn't decide, am I going to stay with him or leave? So she was with him for years until we released it. And in fact, I expected her to leave. She didn't. We released it, let her process through it, and she said, "Oh, he's a good man. And if I want to be forgiven for my mistakes, I want to forgive him for his." So it is very interesting what it can do to us when we have these life quakes that aren't death, that can lead to these things stuck in our subconscious. I find it fascinating.
I love that you used it in therapy.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I was actually doing that before we were perhaps technically allowed to do it, but it was so effective. I wasn't going to keep my clients from having it, so I brought it in wherever I could, and I told them it was their choice. But ultimately, I ended up going into my own coaching practice because I couldn't do as much as I wanted to. Tapping can do so many things, but if you're limited by the insurance companies, by the expectations of the field, then I couldn't use it for that. So I went to my own space where I could do what needed to get done. Now, there's some things I can't do. I can't work with people to relieve their depression or anxiety disorders or things like that. However, for me, what I'm here to do is help people change their lives so they live more fully. And releasing the kind of grief that has you regretting lost time is one of those things that'll keep you from living fully. So,
I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, because therapy and coaching are very different, and they're not. They're just different modalities to get at the same thing. That yes, you can do certain things in one that you can't do with the other. Using tapping can shorten the need for 6 years of therapy. Not completely. It doesn't mean that therapy is not needed,
yeah.
yet it can get at things in a different way, in a physical way, and often in a quicker way.
And to be fair, plenty of therapists are learning tapping and bringing it into the therapy room. I just gave a CEU training for an hour to a group of therapists at the beginning of the week, because they're all curious about it. And, I wasn't teaching them how to do tapping, because a 1 hour is not going to get it. But I was telling them where they could go learn it, and then they can bring it back into the therapy room. So if someone has an emotional, a diagnosable issue that they want to work on, finding the therapist who has that kind of training can be really, as you say, can cut it much shorter. You can get through the process, the whatever it is you are trying to change, you can get there faster.
Right. So give me an example of how you've used it to help people.
Okay.
And I mean, you did
Well,
give
one
me
of
one.
oh, I could go on all day, and I am not going to give any identifying information by which anyone could know who this is, because that's one of the things I carefully protect my clients. But I had one woman who came to me, and she was just really stuck. She wasn't letting money in. I mean, she knew what she needed to do to make the money, and she would sort of hold herself back and show up in ways that weren't as effective. And so things were really crunching down for her. So she comes to me, and we start tapping. And what comes up is she had gone through bankruptcy. And from that, she had internalized that it wasn't safe for her to have money. If she had money, she'd lose it, she'd spend it wrong. Anyway, so we tapped and released that. And it is interesting, because plenty of people go through bankruptcy and they don't internalize that rule. She had. I had another client who went through bankruptcy, no problems with that. It was something else. So it depends on the person. It depends on how they see what they've been through, and depends on how old they were when it happened. Quite often, I'm working with people on stuff that happened as children that they wouldn't even necessarily know was a problem. It was just like, when I was a little kid and we had to move, and all my friends were being left behind, and now I'm in a new place and there's some bullies. So what they internalize is not safe to be seen, right? So that can happen as a child. A lot of the stuff I was thinking about as life quakes, actually, that's more like as an adult can happen, which is interesting, because when something happens when you're an adult, it can be quicker to release it. But some of these things that happen as a child, like, for years and years, my mother told me we didn't have enough money for anything. And so I've internalized that I will never have enough money for what I want. Well, that's a different kind of issue. I wouldn't call that a life quake, but a life quake would be a client of mine who had a child who got very sick. And no, actually, there was an accident. Because they had been sick, something happened. And this accident had almost killed the child. And the mother was like, okay, internalized as an adult, I always have to be vigilant. I have to be working really hard to make sure everything's okay. And so, long after the kid recovered and everything was good, they're working really hard and exhausting themselves. And so we had to go back and find that and change that event, change the meaning it had for her using the tapping. So those are some of the examples.
What I also heard was the kid moving. While we don't always think of moving as a life quake, you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your community, you're leaving a home that has lots of memories. For kids going off to college, they're also leaving home. I mean, they're exciting times. They're also, in many ways, grief-producing.
Yep. And as an adult, quite often my client will say, "Oh yeah, but as a kid, I was fine. I recovered." But when it happens when you're a child, your understanding of it is limited by, the wisdom you already have, your developmental stage, and it can be traumatic, a life quake. And then, you kind of put it in a bubble and move on, but that bubble is still there. And the subconscious limitations or rules that you internalized are still there until you release them.
That's fascinating. And how that bubble morphs to to add in the new experiences that you're having, how um, you're adjusting and redefining things as your
Mhm.
experiences and your intellect changes.
Yeah.
'Cause-
It is fascinating because as an adult, they look back and say, well, it's perfectly safe for me to be seen now. I don't have any bullies at my new school who are attacking me because I'm not at the new school. I'm moved on. And yet, if I'm supposed to get on a video and create a video, and I've got that rule that it's not safe to be seen, I'll shut it down. I won't let myself do it. Or if I do it, it'll be very stilted. Or I won't get up on stage to talk, or I won't post on social media, or whatever it is. But it has nothing to do with the bullies at school, except it has everything to do with going through that experience
Right.
and internalizing that rule that's getting in the way now.
And also maybe now you're being the bully to yourself.
Of course, yeah.
That there may be no bullies out there. You're just anticipating the bullies.
Yes. And forgetting that, you've grown up and you've got all these resources, and if some troll online harasses you, you can ignore them. You can send them
Delete,
on their way. You can do things.
delete.
But that's the trap, is that you think, oh, but I know that. I'm an adult now. I know that I can deal with that. Why can't I just push through it? It's because that internalized rule from the life quake is still telling you it's not safe. That you're going to get hurt. You won't. People stop loving you. Whatever it is, it's telling you that in a very emotional way that doesn't respond so much to logic and reason and ration until we tap and change it, really.
Well, it's sort of like it's gone from your conscious brain into every cell in your body now believes all of that instead of saying, "Oh yeah, well I know that, but who cares?" The
Yeah,
knowing of it is just a tiny part of it. And that's
yeah.
why tapping is so wonderful.
And it's so cool with the tapping. You can tell when it's loosened its grip, because they'll go from saying, yeah, this thing, I feel it. Oh, they'll say, I don't even know why I care about that anymore. It's called a cognitive shift. And it's fun to see those, because okay, things have moved. We're no longer stuck in the past.
So let's do a little bit of tapping.
Sure.
I
So
have to take my glasses off because I can't get all of my spots. Whoops.
okay. Love those glasses, but yeah, they're going to get in the way. So what I would say is, at the beginning, we showed the tapping points. If you're going through if you're going through it now, do what you need to get through it. But if you keep remembering it, or you get feeling kind of stuck with the emotions that come up, you can do something where you're just simply tapping. Quite often, tapping has this routine. Even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. You say it 3 times, and then you go around the points. This problem, this problem, this problem. Okay, I often teach that with stress. And the reason for the words is to keep you focused on the issue that you're working on to release. But, if you're in the middle of it, if you're feeling it like it's as you said, like an anniversary date, and oh boy, oh yeah, this happened and I'm really feeling it, then all you have to do is tap. You just tap. It's not about distracting yourself. That can come if you release whatever is there on the surface, keeping you kind of caged. Then sure, move on. But it's not about, okay, I'm going to tap and try to find anything else that I can think about so that I'm not feeling this. No, it's just tapping while the feelings are there and acknowledging them. Yep, they're there, and letting them move. So you don't have to say anything. So you tap on the side of your hand, and then you tap on your eyebrow point, and then the side of your eye on that eye socket, and under your eye. At some point, they said 5 to 7 taps on each point. I don't think it matters. Tap as you feel good, as it feels right. And if any point feels particularly good, tap on that some more. Actually, just spend some extra time on that. And then you just want to keep going around the points. I heard a story. This was not my own client, but I heard, and then you're under your arm there. I heard from someone who had worked with someone who had gone through a trauma, And while they were tapping, they felt like, oh, I just want to do my third eye. Okay. So they finally just did that for a while. And then that helped. And later on, they found out that tapping there, that can be good for trauma, real, big T trauma stuff. So if you feel like
your whole hand for the third eye?
yeah, I do that. And I've been told don't do that too much. It's like your third eye doesn't want all that much attention. But if you've been through trauma and you feel like, oh, I really want to do that, and I've had other people say, this feels so good. I really want to just stay here. And so if you've got that experience, go ahead and let that spot get some extra attention. Now, I think there's some benefit to going around all the points eventually. Somewhere I read that if you've got at least 4 of these points, you're going to get some benefit. Just 1 point, I'm not sure that'll get you everywhere you want to go, but 1 point that's calling for extra attention, give it extra attention. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I was going to ask, is the point under the eye, is that basically like where your sinus is?
I think it might be because I've done this while having a cold, and it's like, ooh, I can feel that, and it feels good actually.
I'm feeling it now when it's fall allergy season.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we're tapping there because it's the sinuses. What these tapping points are is where certain things called energy meridians, these lines of energy that run through your body, come up near the surface. So if you tap on the point that coming near that surface point there, then you're activating that meridian. Western science didn't used to believe in energy meridians, even though Chinese medicine knew about them for 4,000 years or something. But eventually, some scientists out of South Korea invented a tool that could measure this energy flow.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very subtle, but with this tool, they could now, lo and behold, Western science says, yeah, look at that. Energy meridians, they exist. They might have named them something else, but
Probably. Interesting. And I'm guessing they could also tell where they're not moving and should be moving.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about that. I mean, there's probably always some movement, but at least when you talk about it with the people who've learned tapping, what they'll say is, yeah, if the energy gets stuck. Now, is it completely stuck or is it sluggish? I don't know. But the tapping does seem to activate things and move things along. Whether that's metaphorical or real, I don't know.
Are there other points that are not on the upper body that could be helpful? Or
yes, there are. There's tapping points on the hand where you tap at the base of the fingernail on the side of the finger. So you can do all of those. Used to be that you would include that in every time you went through a round of tapping. That's since they found they didn't really need to do that. But there's also a point here between the little finger and the ring finger. If you tap there, I think it's the same as this 4th finger tapping point. It's the same meridian. So, so those are points that tapping practitioners have learned. The inside of the wrist can be one. I think that gets a bunch of the energy meridians that are coming through the fingers, and then they come down through the wrist. So if you tap there, you're getting a lot of those different meridians being activated. And then you can also tap on either side of your ankle. But if you're pregnant, don't do that because I'm told that can induce labor. So don't mess with that one. There's some spots on the torso. If sometimes somebody can't use this tapping point, and so there's a point called the what did he call it? Something about it's painful when you start. It's where one of the lymph nodes is, right? So you go down about 3 inches and over about 3 inches. Let me go the other direction.
Either side.
Either side. Yep. And if you push in really hard and rub there, it's called the sore spot. And I just remembered it, having done this, because I haven't used it very often, and it is sore. You do that enough times, and you get the lymph moving, and so it's not sore anymore. But that one can replace this one, which I was saying was so important for depression anyway. So,
interesting. That's
grief.
This is always the spot that when I have a massage hurts the most.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, ouch, stop.
So maybe for you, Amy, do
I
it every
may be
day.
needing to do this
Yes,
and to
get
do
the
both
lymph moving and
sides,
getting the energy moving.
so that it's even.
I would. I mean, for that particular one, I would. I mean, when you're doing it for tapping to get yourself to replace this, you don't have to do both sides. You can do just one. But if it's sore, you might want to do that.
And I know that you have said it doesn't matter which hand you do or which side of the body or switching midpoint, midway, because I know
It doesn't
sometimes
at
I'll
all.
get
Very rare.
tired. My right arm will get tired doing all this. So I switch.
Yeah, I get bored, I switch, and I've had some people who say, "Oh no, I need to be balanced," so they'll tap on both sides. And there is a neat move. If somebody seems stuck, you might try. You cross the arms and you tap like that.
Oh, interesting.
But I mean, I very rarely do that, but every now and then I'll throw that in.
I don't think I'm coordinated enough to be able to. So let me ask the few minutes that we have left, if somebody wants to start tapping and work with somebody, now you're
Mhm.
doing more business
Yeah.
stuff. How do they find a practitioner? And how do they know if the practitioner knows what they're talking about? That's a hard one.
Yes, it is. Well, I'll tell you if if it's a diagnosable mental health issue, you really have to have the therapist. So if you can find a therapist who says they have tapping training, I think that's ideal. You want to ask them what that training is. So if they watched a 10-minute video on YouTube, keep looking. And really, with any tapping practitioner, you want to make sure that they've gotten, they tell you what kind of experience they've had, including the training. So there are a lot of different kinds of trainings out there. There are also certification programs. So if you really don't know if someone is certified by one of these programs, that can really be a sign that they have done significant work so that they're able to help. If you're working on some trauma, you want somebody who's been trained up in working with trauma. So as a therapist, I was trained in working with trauma, and then I added the tapping to what I did. And so that I did some extra training into trauma and working with trauma. So you might want to find somebody like that. And there is actually a tapping program out there called Tapping Out of Trauma that trains people who are already practitioners. They've learned how to do basic tapping, and then they learn this additional stuff. It's Craig Weiner and Suzanne Fagioli run it, and I think it's excellent. I haven't actually taken it because I did the training, the trauma training on my own with my therapy practice. So find out how they know tapping, what they have done to learn it. And that's a legitimate question, and anyone should be able to tell you that. If it's not on their website, ask them before you hire them.
And if they can't, then stay away.
They might be good, but I'd see if you could find somebody who has a little bit more experience in training. And experience is important too. I've had people who've gone through the trainings, so they know all the theory stuff, and they've got a little bit of practice, but having more practice, especially in the area you want to work on with them, that makes a difference. I mean, I've been working with women entrepreneurs for many years now. In fact, I started tapping in 2006. So I got to update my bio because it's been more than 14 years that I've been, fair amount, more than 14 years that I've been doing tapping. But working with the women business owners, that goes back, I don't know, like 10 years. And the process of doing that, I have uncovered so many things that I didn't know when I started. So if you can find someone who's got some serious experience with it, that's ideal. Now, tapping is very powerful and it can be helpful even with somebody who's fairly new to it. But, if your money is important and your time is important, I would spend a bit of time looking for that person who has the expertise in the area. And it doesn't have to be just tapping. But if you want to do the tapping piece, make sure they have the expertise in the tapping, and then they can bring in all these other things with them. So for anyone who's curious about what I do and the kind of work I do with subconscious blocks, I have, they can go to my site. I brought a gift basically for your listeners. My site is unblockresults.com. And if you go to that unblockresults.com / what was it? Grief, I think. No, Lifequake. Never mind. Unblockresults.com / Lifequake. Then you'll get to take the quiz I have to find out if you have more mindset or visibility or profitability blocks. And then once you've taken the quiz, then you get 3 tap-along videos to release a common block in each one of those areas. So, and then there's a button you can click on if you don't want to take the quiz. But the quiz is fun. Take the quiz.
It's always fun to take quizzes.
Yeah.
And I will do a shameless plug that if you are a female entrepreneur and would like to work with Nancy, the MVP program is fabulous.
Thank you.
And I would definitely recommend it. And I know that we do have viewers who are.
Okay.
So, and are you going to be starting new groups?
I'm in the process of doing that right this minute. So somebody hears this podcast and reaches out to me right away, they could get into that. But I'm always collecting people till I have a full club to put in, and then I'll have my quarterly fast track days where people can join at that point too. And then there's a number of people who come in at that time.
Definitely worth it. And
thank you.
Yes, it's been fabulous for me. So, Nancy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you and hearing about how people can use tapping EFT for lifequakes and to not be afraid to try it on your own without words. You don't need the statement. That was freeing.
Yeah, and as long as you're not trying to process your own trauma, like big T trauma, that it shouldn't have any problems, and it could very well help. If you got trauma, go to somebody who knows what they're doing with trauma. So
exactly. So thank you again, and we'll put up your links and everything in the notes. And thank you. Join us again for our next podcast.
Thank you.
If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at